strategy was just to stay in the course and do your chores. When you're happy, you ain't need to abort. Never explored nothing unless he roll around on his horse. The one day he was up on his horse.
What's up, my wizards? It's Dev from Mtg down there on the YouTube.com, and last time you saw me, I gave you a choice between two decks, and although there were some naysayers who wanted to see red-black aggro, the vast majority of you wanted to see a man about a horse. So we're finally going to do the Crested Sunmare deck, and this deck has been requested so much, I figured I'd do it twice. That's right, the first double deck of the season, so let's get ready for Crested Sunmare. And why am I wearing my Volkswagen shirt? Horsepower. Now, the first deck we're going to profile here is just mono white horse. We're going to keep it simple, you know. I've seen green white horse in standard. I've seen black white horse, but I think that just one color is a benefit to us because it helps keep the deck stable. So let's start the thing off by going ahead and looking at the Triple Crown winner, Crested Sunmare. Both decks are going to play a playset of this thing because it's the whole reason that we're even building the thing. So let's play 4. Well, the first thing I want to point out about Crested Sunmare is that he's actually not a terrible deal in and of himself, you know. We want like 4 mana 5/5s if they're going to be standard playable, but you could do worse than a 5 mana 5/5 even if it didn't have any other lines of text. Probably wouldn't see any standard play if it didn't have any other lines of text, but still, you could do a lot worse on turn 5 than putting a guy with 5 power on the board that survives Grasp of Darkness. But of course, we're more concerned with the text that is written on the card. We want to gain a bunch of life, and key here is the ability to gain life the same turn that you play Crested Sunmare without having to pump any extra mana into it, which this deck has 18 ways of doing. That's a lot of life gain, and it'll help you win the race. Is that a horse joke? That's a horse joke. Another good thing about Sunmare is that even though it doesn't have indestructibility itself, it's still kind of tough to take down. You know, Fatal Push can't kill it. Harness Lightning has a pretty tough time killing it a lot of the time. Grasp of Darkness can't kill it. Cut can't kill it. There's really not a whole lot of red removal besides Hour of Devastation, which you do have to look out for because Hour of Devastation does not care about the indestructibility on your horses. You got to look out for HOD, but whatever. Most of the removal in the format can't touch a Sunmare, which can be a nightmare for the opponent. Get it? Nightmare. Now, the other most important card in this deck is Oketra's Monument, which we're going to play a whole 4 of. That's right, it's a monument deck. Bet you didn't see that coming. Placeholder for a joke about blinders. Yeah, that was only half a joke, but I'll take it. Basically, this can let you get your Crested Sunmare on turn 4. That's pretty sweet. Sometimes you can get 10 power on the board at the end of your turn 4. 5 of it's indestructible. That's ridiculous. Etherworks Marvel did that, you know, it put out an Ulamog on turn 4 like 10% of the time. We have, in some ways, a better chance than 10% of getting 10 power on turn 4, so be a pretty powerful interaction right there. But obviously, Monument does way more than that in this deck. We are geared towards gaining life, but a lot of this deck just functions like a normal Oketra's Monument deck, which means all the creatures, all the value. But the way we built this deck, all the creatures means all the life. For example, Anointer Priest. We're going to play a playset of this as well because whenever we get a token, we gain a life, which is pretty sweet. You know, if we go Anointer Priest, Oketra's Monument, Crested Sunmare, well, then Crested Sunmare comes into play, gets us a token, we gain a life, boom, we get a horse at the end of the turn. Pretty sweet deal. But obviously, Anointer Priest is just good, period. You know, she's going to gain you a life whenever you get a Monument token, which is going to translate to a lot of life, like sometimes 4 or 5 life in a turn, depending on what all you've got to play and how many clues you've got out that you can pop and get more guys to play. So just Anointed Priest is not often seen in Oketra's Monument decks, if ever, but especially in a deck that's trying to gain life, there's a real reason to play her. I'm also going to play 4 Pious Evangel in this deck. This is another thing that if we have it out when we play our Sunmare, we're guaranteed a horse at the end of the turn. So as long as we're mono white, I don't see any reason not to play the card, especially considering it also works really well with Monument too. You know, whenever we play a creature, we essentially get 2 creatures, which means we'll get 2 life off of this guy. Not bad at all when we're trying to stay in the game. I'm also going to play 4 Glorybound Initiate in the deck. I feel like this is a no-brainer. This is a very powerful creature in this standard environment. And as long as it doesn't get hit by, like, targeted removal spells like Grasp of Darkness or whatever when it goes to swing in, then it's pretty much guaranteed to gain us life the turn that Crested Sunmare comes into play. Again, barring any removal spells. But if it either, you know, gets blocked by or dies to another creature in combat, or even if it gets through the opponent's defenses, then one way or another, we're gaining some life, and Crested Sunmare will make us a 5/5 horse. Usually, we're more than happy to make the trade of an Exerted Glorybound for a 5/5 indestructible. Good trade. It's also just a decent curve filler, you know. On turn 2, you could do a lot worse than this. It can either trade with something on your opponent's side of the board, or if it gets in once or twice, then you've gained a bunch of life and you've taken a bunch of points off your opponent's life total. So Glorybound is just an all-around decent card, and obviously, Monument can make it cost only 1. That's just one of the best deals you can imagine. I'm also going to play 4 copies of Sacred Cat in the deck. Looks like a weird inclusion, but I want lifelink creatures. I don't want them to cost a whole lot. I also want a 1-drop we can play even if we don't have an Catcher's Monument. We can play a very cheap creature. I also like that we can bring it back, so we play it turn 1 and it dies and we're set up with a Crested Sunmare in our hand. We can always just embalm it on turn 4, you know, and then turn 5, swing in with it, regardless of what happens again, barring any removal spells. You know, whether it gets blocked or it gets through, we're gaining life, so we can play our Crested Sunmare. And again, we do not mind trading our 1/1 cat for a 5/5 indestructible horse. Another cool thing about Sacred Cat that I think kind of puts it over the line as far as playability in this deck is that it's one of the only cards in this deck, at least, that can threaten to gain us life on our opponent's turn. If we have a Crested Sunmare out and a Sacred Cat just sitting there untapped, our opponent might think twice about swinging in because they do not want to give us a horse. Even if our cat dies, we're getting a horse because, hey, we gained life. Does saying hey count as a horse joke? I'm going to go ahead and give it to myself down there. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and give it to myself down there. I shouldn't say things like that on YouTube. But anyway, the rest of this deck is mostly just some stock pieces from the Catcher's Monument deck. So let's take a look at all those right now. We're going to play 4 copies of Hanwire Militia Captain, 4 copies of Bygone Bishop, 3 Selfless Spirits, and 2 Aviary Mechanics. Well, Militia Captain's obviously great. A deck that plays a whole bunch of creatures, and it can make creatures of its own too, so that's pretty sweet as well. Just Militia Captain is a 4/of in pretty much every Monument build that you're going to find, and there's a reason for that. It's made for this deck, in this deck alone. Same thing with Bygone Bishop, man. Getting to play this on turn 4, so let's say we've got a turn 3 Monument. If we can untap with it, then on turn 4 we can go Bygone Bishop into like a couple of other 2-drops really easily because we've got the discounts from Monument. We'll end up getting a bunch of extra creatures off the Monument, and we'll end up getting a couple of extra clues off of Bygone Bishop. Of course, if we've got an Norner Priest too, we just gained all the life in the world. So you can set up some pretty crazy turn 4 plays, and some of the best turn 4 plays you can set up are with Bygone Bishop because you want those clues. Now, I'm still going to play 3 copies of Selfless Spirit in the deck, despite the fact that all of our horse tokens are indestructible because none of our other creatures are. You know, we can recover from sweepers pretty well. We've got a Catcher's Monument. We've got all those clue tokens from Bygone Bishop. We can embalm a Norner Priest. We can embalm Sacred Cat, but I still want to be able to recover from, or at least not be hit by, most sweepers. Obviously, Hour of Devastation doesn't care about Selfless Spirit either, but all the other sweepers do, and obviously, this will be really good in combat situations. If we've got a bunch of stuff that would otherwise die, but we've got a Selfless Spirit, then we can be a little bit more cavalier. That's a good horse joke. We can be a little bit more cavalier about just swinging the entire army in. And the Aviary Mechanics, this looks like a weird card, but actually this functions incredibly well in Catcher's Monuments decks, especially if you're able to get more than one of them in your hand, because you can just go like bounce, 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 bounce. It's like an R. Kelly song. Bounce, 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 bounce. It's probably not great to make R. Kelly jokes either right now because of what's in the news. But anyway, obviously, Aviary Mechanic is pretty sweet for this deck because you can bounce stuff, play it again, get clues, get tokens, whatever, get life if you've got a Norner Priest or Pious Evangel out. So Aviary Mechanic, there's just like so many crazy tricks with him in this deck. And honestly, even though we're playing just the 2, it's not hard to draw into a second one considering we're extending the game a lot by gaining all this life and we're getting a bunch of clues off of Bygone Bishop. There's 23 lands in this deck, and a couple of them I want to talk about. First of all, Westvale Abbey is a no-brainer, and can obviously bring in a life-linking Ormondal, which can be pretty sweet with Crested Sunmare. But there's a couple of weird choices in here. Blighted Steppe is a way to gain life on your opponent's turn. There's not a lot of ways of doing that, so we got to play Blighted Steppe, and it can gain us like legit 40 life sometimes. So we'll play that for that reason too. And works with Crested Sunmare, yay. But a couple of weird ones in this deck are obviously the 2 Crypt of the Eternals. We're a mono-white deck here, so I felt like we could play a couple more colorless lands and be totally fine with it. Turns out we can. This is just another way of getting a life on the turn that you play Crested Sunmare without having to spend any mana. It's important to do that as often as possible. And last thing while I'm on the lands, Shefet Dunes is actually amazing. First of all, yes, this will cost us a little bit of life every now and again, but we don't care considering we're gaining so much life. And newer players do remember that you can lose 300 life on your turn. It doesn't matter. If you gain 1 life during that turn where you lost 300 life and you somehow live, then you'll still get a horse at the end of your turn. It doesn't matter what the net gain or loss of life is. As long as you gain life at all, you'll get a horse. And this is pretty cool because it can make our army of 1/1s a little bit bigger. We can send them all in. That's nice. Here's our sideboard right here. Authority of the Consuls is a no-brainer against creature decks. You know, we want to bring this in because it's a way to gain life on their turn and keep their creatures tapped down and stuff. That's really awesome. The Fragmentize is in there against troublesome artifacts and enchantments, obviously. Gideon's Defeat will gain us life. That's pretty sweet. And can also take out Gideon's and other important white creatures if we come across them. Fairgrounds Warden is in there against the creature-based decks, too. Sunscourge Champion can be really nice, again, against mid-range and creature-based decks. We'll gain life at least twice, and if we have no other way of gaining life, but we have a Sunscourge Champion in the graveyard, it can sometimes be worth bringing him back just to get the trigger off of the horse. I actually like Champion a lot. And, of course, 2 Anointed Procession, because it's got to be somewhere in the deck. We don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth, lol. And here are your power rankings right here. Final score of Nintendo 64, which is pretty good for a deck that actually doesn't cost that much. I mean, we're mostly uncommons and commons, and a few rares here. And yeah, Crested Sunmare has kind of gone out of control the last week here. It was just like $1.50, but now it's like $5, which is crazy. So the deck isn't necessarily a budget deck, but it's still a relatively cheap deck that does a lot of work. 64 is a good score for a deck that's this cheap, you know? And our stats aren't like super impressive, you know? We don't play the most powerful cards in the world. We're not incredibly fast. We sort of trot more than we gallop, but we still end up gaining a bunch of life and getting this sort of inevitable board presence that we can push through in the end. Just really, really tough deck to get around and get through for some other decks. This thing looks like it needs to be put down, but trust me, this thing's a thoroughbred. So seriously, take this one to the track and get a couple of laps in with it. I think you'll like this deck, but we got 2 decks to cover today and not a whole lot of time. So let me go ahead and talk about the second deck. Now remember towards the beginning of the video where I said we wanted to keep it simple, let's play mono white horses. There's no reason to play 2-color horse decks. Well, I'm going to completely go against that now and show you 4-color horse. The only reason I built this deck is so we can call it Rainbow Dash. Now, I may have built the deck for its name, but the deck actually ended up being pretty good. What we ended up with here is definitely a deck you can win with, and it's probably going to be the coolest deck at F&M. So, let me show you this deck real quick, starting, of course, with 4 copies of Crested Sunmare. This card is no less important in this deck. It's the entire reason that we're going to build it. So, we're going to play all 4 copies. We want to see it. A couple of things I didn't talk about the last time I talked about Sunmare. First of all, a reason to play 4 copies is because if you have 2 copies in play, they give each other indestructible. That can be super duper important, so remember that. But remember earlier I said that one of the most important things that you can do with this card is to ensure that you're gaining life the turn that it comes into play with no extra mana expense to you. Well, the first deck had like 18 ways of doing it. This deck has like 19 ways of doing it, and this deck is a little bit better when it comes to getting life on your opponent's turn. First deck didn't have a whole lot of ways of doing that. This deck has like 10 ways of gaining life on your opponent's turn. So let's look at all the non-horse stuff that we're playing in this deck. First of all, we're going to play 4 copies of Jedi Offshoot. Definitely a no-brainer if we're playing green in the deck at all. Well, Offshoot is obviously one of the ways that we can get life on the turn that we play Crested Sunmare. There's an awful lot of ways of doing that, but Offshoot also blocks pretty well in the early game and can gain you like a fair amount of life throughout the game. If he doesn't die, he's going to gain you like 7 or 8 life, you know, pretty easily. So I've always liked Offshoot, and he definitely goes in this deck, no questions asked. Now, besides Crested Sunmare, one of the only holdovers from the first deck is Glorybound Initiate. I just found this card to be too good. You know, we've all played with GBI to some extent, or at least against him maybe, at this point, and he is a very good card. There is no denying that Glorybound is a very good card in his own right, but in this deck, he's a way to gain life, so we might as well play probably the best life-gaining card in Standard. It's up there. Here's where it gets weird as far as creatures. We're going to play 2 copies of Drana's Emissary in this deck. This is guaranteed life gain every turn that it stays out, which means that it's yet another way to get Crested Sunmare to give us an extra horse already without spending any extra mana the turn it comes into play. That's really, really important, and obviously, if we can keep a horse and an emissary out, then we'll gain life every single turn, no matter what we draw. We can have 0 cards in our hand for the rest of the game. As long as those 2 cards stay out, we're getting horses every turn. And to finish off the creatures in this deck, there's only 15 creatures. That's actually not a terrible number of creatures, but it felt like the creatures went really fast. But anyway, we're just going to play 1 copy of Noxious Gearhulk in this deck. Now, obviously, Noxious is crazy. You know, the turn after we play Crested Sunmare, we can technically play Noxious Gearhulk, kill one of their dudes, ensure that we get a horse too. A lot of people don't pay a whole lot of attention to the fact that this card gains you life. Sure, you'll gain your life, but that's not what you're excited about when you play Noxious Gearhulk. Well, in this deck, you definitely have a reason to be excited about it. Now, in this deck, since we're 4 colors, we should probably play some Planeswalkers, I would say. So let's start with 3 whole copies of the only blue card in the main deck, Dovin Baan. Now, in the first tournament of Hour of Devastation Standard, Dovin Baan performed pretty well. He's actually in the winning deck. We got to see him on camera do some work, too. So, Dovin Baan may be making a comeback here. There's a lot of players that never thought he was bad. I always thought Dovin Baan was pretty sweet. And in this deck, he's dope, because on turn 4, we can go ahead and play Dovin, kill a, well, not kill a creature, but at least keep a creature from dealing damage to us for a turn. That protects our Dovin. Next turn, we'll drop our Crested Sunmare, we'll gain 2, we'll draw a card, and we'll guarantee a horse at the end of our turn. Dovin is super dope in this deck. He's pseudo removal, at least keeps a creature off your back for a turn. He obviously gains us life. He's card advantage. We need a lot of that. And the ultimate's not half bad either, but you'll almost never get there. We're mostly concerned with drawing cards and gaining life, something Dovin does really well. Also, going to play 2 copies of Sorin Grim Nemesis in this deck. This gives us overall 3 6-drops, which I think we can handle with the way we built the mana base and the rest of the deck here. We obviously not only want to gain life the turn the Crested Sunmare comes into play, but we also want to keep gaining life the turn after he comes into play, and the turn after that, and the turn after that. So I think it can be important to have some 6-drops in a deck, because you're able to not only gain life on your 6th turn, get another horse from Crested Sunmare, but you're able to drop a really powerful card like Noxious Gearhulk or Sorin, who can kill guys and gain you life, just like Noxious Gearhulk. This is something that essentially gives you a 2-for-1, you know? Kill their guy, you get a guy, and you gain some life. That's super awesome. And obviously all the rest of the stuff that Sorin does is really good. If you draw him when you're in a situation where you don't really care about gaining life or getting horses, he still does all this awesome stuff. But on to the spells here, starting with the most important of the bunch, and that is Blessed Alliance. It earns a playset because it is that good. First of all, this is really good at killing Torrential Gearhulks. I just want to throw that out there. This is really good at killing Torrential Gearhulks. It's also pretty decent at killing Bristling Hydra, considering, you know, allowing for the idea that we kept the board relatively clean up to then. This can kill Bristling Hydra, and that's really, really important, but it can also just kill creatures. We need some removal in this deck, and it's nice to have some removal that doubles as life gain for Crested Sunmare. How awesome is that? And if we want to, we can untap some horses that are indestructible, get them back on defense after attacks, or we can untap an Exerted Glorybound Initiate. That's also an option. So Blessed Alliance just does everything in this deck. We want some removal. We want to gain life. Why not have both of them on one card? For 2 mana and instant speed. This is yet another thing that allows us to gain life on our opponent's turn. Incredibly important. I'm going to play a whole 4 copies of Renewed Faith in the deck, and I'm still not sure that's right. It could be 2 or 3 copies and maybe put some more removal in, but I have liked Renewed Faith here. It's essentially, sometimes at least, a fog. You know, a fog either on an early combat step or on like one big dude is not bad. It can also draw us cards, something that we're looking to do in this deck, so we can draw into the important stuff. But mostly it's there to gain life and do so, again, on our opponent's turn. That's just a good deal. I'm also going to play 2 copies of Essence Extraction in this deck. You don't see this card a whole lot anymore, and I was a little bit reluctant at first about the double black and the casting cost, but turns out we can make it a lot of the time by turn 3. And even if we can't make it by turn 3, and even if just we need to make it by like turn 6, that's very easy. You don't need to make it for turn 6 sometimes to gain life for Crested Sunmare. Well, again, just like some of the other cards in this deck, we can essentially 2-for-1 the opponent. Kill one of their guys and get a horse. That's awesome. And again, Essence Extraction is instant speed, so being able to do that on your opponent's turn is absolutely dirty. Now to finish off the deck, I'm going to play a little bit of mana fixing. That's really important in a 4-color deck, so we're going to do that. We're going to play 3 copies of Attune with Ether to start things off, and then 2 copies of Gift of Paradise as a kind of surprise here. But Gift of Paradise obviously gains us life, and it fixes our mana, and it ramps us. All that's great. All that's good. We should do that. Now, the Attune with Ether, on the other hand, gets us whatever color mana that we might need at any given time. That's just so important in this 4-color deck to be able to, for just 1 mana, get whatever color you might need. And we need to play Ether Hub in this mana base, again, because we're 4 colors, and this will provide some energy for that. That's all good. Here are your lands right here in this deck. There are 25 of them. Even though we have Attune with Ether, we have Gift of Paradise, I still want to play a bunch of lands in this deck. We've got to make every single one of our drops throughout the game, and we got to get to 6 a lot of the time. So I want to play a bunch of lands in this deck despite the fact that we have ramp and ways of going and getting lands. Gotta do it. So there's that, but also tech reasons. Note Evolving Wilds right here, which we're only playing the one of. I really don't feel like we have slots for a bunch of wilds, but it can be important sometimes considering we've got Jedi Offshoot, and Evolving Wilds can be a way to gain life on our opponent's turn as long as we have an Offshoot into play. And here's your sideboard right here. Authority of the Consuls is in there one more time because, you know, we should probably play that. Fatal Push against small aggro decks. Negate is a very important card and really the only other blue card. This can sometimes just keep them from killing your horse or any other important permanents that you have out. Keep them from playing artifacts, keep them from playing enchantments and planeswalkers. Just stops so much and is in a lot of ways a blossoming defense for our horse, so that's important too. Also note the 2 copies of Kambal. This is a little cute, honestly, you know, but it does give our opponent a headache, especially if we have a Crested Sunmare out. So, not bad by any stretch. Appetite for the Unnatural is probably the most important card in the whole sideboard. This can take out anything from other monuments, Heart of Kirin, it can take out Torrential Gearhulk, enchantments like Frank Sanity, New Perspectives, or whatever else we see, and, importantly, gain us life at instant speed. Always good. And obviously, we're just going to run 1 copy of Fumigate in case things get out of hand. Another thing about Fumigate, by the way, is that if we've got like 2 or 3 indestructible horses out, usually just 2, then we can Fumigate, blow up the entire board except for our horses, and usually just win that way. And here are your power rankings for this deck, a final score of Nintendo 64. And no, I didn't plan that at all. It just kind of shook out that way. So, you know, this deck is a little bit more powerful, but not a whole lot more powerful. It's really just the mana base that feels more powerful in this deck, but a couple of other cards too. If the first deck trots, this one lopes. It's a much slower deck. So we're trying, this is more of a mid-range strategy than anything, you know. But altogether, the deck comes together really well, you know. Just all of these pieces work pretty well in conjunction. It doesn't necessarily feel like a combo deck, but there is a butt-ton of synergy. All these cards work together really well. We've basically taken all of the best cards from these 4 colors and put them together for this deck. Dovin Bane, by the way, or Dovin Bond, definitely worth playing in this deck. He is seriously an all-star and worth adding the blue mana. Well, cowboys and cowgirls, that's all I've got in the trough for this one. But if you're hungry for more horses, don't eat horses. But if you're hungry for horses, hoof it on over to the Manosaurus. Wedge just put up his green-white casual horses deck, and the thing is freaking hilarious. So I fully endorse you going over to that channel and checking that deck out. By the way, another video I want to point your way towards that has nothing to do with horses, by the way. I just think it's some of the best Magic the Gathering content to come out in the last few weeks here, and it's not even by an MTG channel. Go check out Explanation Point's How to Play Magic video. I've been wanting to do a video like this for a while. It's basically a lot of picture-in-picture and pop culture examples and how to play Magic from a comedy perspective. This is the best How to Play Magic video that I've ever seen, ever, by a lot. So, I'm going to link you to it in the description. Go check out Explanation Point's How to Play Magic video. It's great for new people that want to learn how to play, obviously. But, even if you know everything about the game, this video is going to make you laugh a few times. I just remembered that video on the spur of the moment, so I wanted to tell you about it. That might be the last horse joke. I wonder what the count is at this point. That's going to be fun during editing. But anyway, that's all I've got for this one. I'm tapped out for now. But let me know how you felt about it down there in the comments section. What's your horse deck look like? I've seen black-white horse, green-white horse, Abzan horse, 4-color horse, mono-white horse. So many horse decks. So what are you doing with your horse? You know what I ask. You know what I mean. So if you enjoyed this content, you're able to make it through all those dumb horse jokes, make sure you hit the like button. That helps me out a lot. You can also support us on Patreon at patreon.com/SBMTG. You can follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/SBMTGdev. And there's other YouTube stuff you can do, like subscribe, so you get all the deck techs. Not going to tell you what's next, but it is something you've wanted for a while. That's the only hint I'm going to drop. But anyway, I'm Deb from SBMTG. Thanks for watching, my wizards. So let's start this thing off by looking at our triple crown. Go. So let's start this thing off by looking at our triple crown. Triple crown. Go. So let's start this thing off by looking at our triple crown.